Well, hello, friends, and here we are for the second time at the end of another liturgical year for the very last in this season of Between Two Sundays. Mark, another 12 months down.
Pretty exciting.
I thought you were going to say in one to go, but it's good that you.
Well, one to go as well. One to
Well, I'm
go as
glad
well.
you didn't go there, kinda, because I mean, this is it's been another big um, year eight.
Mm,
And churning through to the end of the year where we talk about the reign of Christ, or some places Christ the King Sunday, or traditionally Christ the King Sunday. Um, so let's jump straight in and really talk about, because this is, I think, a day in the liturgical year that can be really misunderstood. Would you agree?
I suspect you're right. I think this is one of those days that can actually be seen as a threat. Um, but actually, it's this beautiful coming together of everything.
Right.
Um, it's pointing to this wonderful future and injecting, as a number of our readings say, I think today, hope. Um, so this is a pinnacle of the story, and the pinnacle is that the Christ of grace and love and welcome and hospitality, this one reigns,
Yeah.
and that is a tremendously hopeful um, way of understanding the direction of the universe.
Yeah, and the beautiful thing too is just that it's not that the rain is coming; the rain has come. Uh,
Yes,
that
yes,
it is not something we have. I mean, there is the hope element of it, of course, but this is something that is happening right now.
yes, yes,
And
yes.
it kind of places us in this story where we can truly say everything's going to be okay. And right now, if we look at living in the world in the way that this Christ, this Jesus has taught us and modeled to us,
Mm.
everything can in fact be okay now. Um, in fact, later on, the words eternal come up in one of our readings. And of course, that comes from Aeon, which literally doesn't mean forever and ever and ever at some time in the future. It actually talks about a
Mm.
quality of life through an age right now that we can experience right now. And
So it's a
so,
now, yeah,
yeah, that's right.
always in the present. Mm.
Yes, exactly. And living in the fullness, which is why Jesus said, I've come that you might have life and
Yes,
life in abundance. If we're
yes.
living in that reign now, um, that's an incredibly powerful thing to do.
Mm.
So, in many ways, some of the commentators talk about this being a Sunday that kind of um, finishes the year in the similar way it started. This acknowledgement of the coming of the Christ into our lives, which is what this season of Advent and Christmas is all about, which we jump into literally next week. And so, in many ways, this kind of can be seen as two things because of the way years work. You can see it as the end of the season where we're coming back to this idea of the Christ came and the Christ is here. And we've had all these stories about the Christ and living in that spirit and world in connection to the Christ. And now this Christ is here. This is what this whole story has been about. But in some ways, it can also be the sort of when you have a TV series and there's always that one episode that leaves you with the cliffhanger.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
this is kind of like the cliffhanger episode where if you come back next season um, for the start of Advent, you will see this Christ that was here. This Christ was, yeah, this whole moving
Mm.
through this
Yeah.
continual motion that we have. So
I
so let's so go on.
sorry. I was just going to comment there. I think it feels kind of good to talk about a liturgical cycle rather than just, we do year A, B, and C, and actually there's this there's this sense that, you know, the 3 years repeat after they are done, and that we really never arrive, we never finish in that sense. And I think I love the idea that the church has kind of said we want to grapple with these texts over and over and over again. So it feels more like a spiral than a linear sort of arrival type thing. Right. It feels like we're visiting over and over and over again. In fact, I know some who would actually argue that, well, we have because there are 4 readings, we actually have a cycle of 3 by 4, 12-year cycle. And you could faithfully focus on each of those readings over the 12 years and still sit with the theme of that idea. Really says we are a people who are constantly going back to Scripture, and we're constantly learning from it. We're constantly expecting to see something new. And so you get this spiral effect rather than this linear arrival kind of effect. And in that sense, the reign of Christ really is part of this story. It's not an ending. It's as much a beginning as any of the other Sundays could be. So what we see in this Reign of Christ collection of readings really should be informing all the other readings that we read from here on in.
Right. Which is why when you were talking about that, this image of a hook came into my mind. If you imagine a hook hanging from the ceiling with each of the year's readings as a length of streamer. It hangs on the hook, and it goes down and it comes back up, and then you hang it on the hook, and then the next one goes down and comes back up, and you hang it on the hook. So there's this movement, but it always comes back to this Christ the King. And you could argue, well, you could do that with any of the seasons, but Christ the King is the one that's constant and consistent. And I think that's a really interesting thought and a good reflection point. Should we? I love
the idea that we get to Christ the King, and then we turn next week to the humblest statement of the action of God, I think, in the incarnation as a child.
Well, I was just going to say,
where we're constantly, you know, we've got right next to each other this statement of reigning over all the universe, and straight away we're into, oh, by the way, let's remember where this story starts. It starts in a humble stable with you know, just prophecy, really. But this is the revelation of this God that reigns over us.
Right.
So we end up with this celebration of God's bigness and authority. And right next to it, we have this celebration of the extraordinary humility and service of God to the world. I think it's a beautiful movement from here into next week, even though it's often seen as a starting again. Actually, it's a continuation.
Yeah. Or maybe Christ the King Sunday is like the prologues to John's Gospel.
Yes, maybe it functions
that this is the cosmic Christ. Now let's see how this cosmic Christ comes into the world. And as you say, it's a continuation that always comes back to this cosmic Christ, this reign of God in the world. Well, how's that for an introduction?
That's the big introduction, isn't it?
That's all right. All right. So is there any particular place you want to start here, or shall we just start digging through and seeing how this stuff all links together?
Yeah, I'm happy to start where you like.
I find Ezekiel, again, remember we're talking about this reign of Christ in the world, and it's really interesting to me that Ezekiel, the Ezekiel passage. By the way, I probably should tell you what the readings are, shouldn't I? We haven't done that yet. The readings for the Reign of Christ Sunday are Ezekiel 34 verses 11 to 16 and 20 to 24, Psalm 100, Ephesians 1 verses 15 to 23 and Matthew 25 verses 31 to 46. Links will be down below if you're watching on YouTube, in the show notes if you're listening on a podcast, or go straight to lectionary.library.vanderbilt.edu and use all the beautiful resources that are there for the lectionary weeks. So what's really interesting about this reading from Ezekiel, though, is this focus on the shepherd, the shepherd image, which, if we were really talking about Christ the King, why have the people who have selected the readings gone straight to this discussion about a shepherd? And I think that's because at the heart of what this reign of Christ is about, to get back to the language that I think is more suitable, I don't know, maybe that's not the word, but you've got this this reign of Christ happening, and at the core of this reign of Christ, I think this is why it's really important that we talk about it like we are, is not some dude on a throne with a crown on his head who's telling people what to do. This is a reign, a leader, an emperor, a king, or whatever you want to call it, who is there to serve the people. That the heart of this one who is reigning is like the heart of a shepherd who will give themselves for the sheep and will make sure the sheep are looked after and fed and watered and cared for and protected. But this is not some oligarch sitting on a throne pompously telling people what to do. This is one who you find disappearing from the throne quite often to go find the one who has left, walked out of the realm and wants to bring them back in. So I think this is a really interesting image to start with, that we're talking about a shepherd who talks about how they're going to care for their flock. And yeah, for me, that's incredibly powerful as the lens through which to understand how this God reigns.
I agree. I love the shepherd image here. I love the seeking image here too. So this is not a God who is detached or uncaring or vengeful. Actually, this is a God who is going to the ends of the earth to seek out those who are ready to be part of his reign.
Right.
I also like the picture of justice. There is, sometimes we hold justice alongside judgment so closely sometimes that we forget that this is actually a very, very good thing. This is a fundamental recognition that all is not right in the world, and God is going to put it all right.
Right.
The only one, this shepherd who knows the sheep no matter how far they go, really is the only one with the capacity to unravel all the, the web of lies and destruction and injustice that is our world. This is this beautiful image of the perfect one who has sought out all, sitting on the throne, who has understood all, who has welcomed all. This one is going to put everything right.
Right.
And it won't be quite as simple as I'm getting rid of all the bad people because all the good people are here. Actually, our New Testament is very clear at times, saying we all do the wrong thing. We all have the image of God living in us. We all bear the image of God. So we're both these things. We're both destructive and we're extraordinarily constructive. And here is this picture of the shepherd bringing justice to that extraordinarily messy situation. We try as people to sort this out every now and again. We'll go to court and we'll try to, but we have to come down with a limited understanding of the people we're dealing with, the scenario that we've been told about, and we have to come down with a yes or no answer. I wonder if this Jesus of justice is going to be much more nuanced than that. Here we have the God who made us, who knows not only you and me, but knows everyone else, not only those from my side of the political line, but knows everything about those from the other side, knows not only everything about me in my nation, but in my culture, but knows everything about everyone in every culture and every nation.
Yeah.
Knows the entire history of each of us and everything. This is the kind of knowledge that will determine that justice is very, very different to the way we imagine it.
Right. And in fact, you were talking about how we often put justice and judgment together. I'm not sure that's the problem. I think the problem comes when we understand justice through the lens of judgment rather than the other way around. Perhaps we need to start thinking about judgment through the lens of justice.
That might be helpful.
And understanding what that means. Particularly when we get to the gospel reading, it might be an important thing to hold together, because I know that when we get there, we'll be talking about how, I know I'll be talking a lot about justice, but there'll be those people who come back with, but judgment is still a part of who God is. Two responses to that. First of all, yes, but let's make sure that we're understanding what judgment is in the context of God. And I think understanding it through the lens of justice as opposed to the other way around is important. The other one is to understand, and I've said this a few times to some people who've jumped in to comments on some of my posts on Instagram in the past, where I've said, why is it that every time a Christian argues that God needs to come from an angle of judgment and that's okay, why is it that all of those people argue for understanding what that means through a human comprehension of what judgment is?
Yes.
Why is there not another way to understand what judgment is? Why does it have to be, and you've heard the stories and probably heard people preach on, the courtroom scene where Jesus is there and then someone gets told and Jesus says, I don't know who they are, and they're carted off to eternal flames, whatever else. Why do we have to understand judgment like that? That's our construct. That's what we've done. Maybe judgment to God looks completely different. And I would argue, I think when you understand the true heart and nature of God as exhibited through the life of Jesus, then what we see is something very different. So justice becomes the lens of what judgment is. And we're seeing this actually being worked out in the world, by the way, where more and more people are turning to a restorative justice model, where judgment is about justice working together is about restoring people, not punishing them. But we'll probably come to that when we get to that reading a bit later on. And the Psalm.
It's a great way to think through the reign of Christ. Is this the Sunday that's really pointing us towards the God who is restoring everything? Suddenly you really are back to restorative justice at that point. The God who is unraveling the mess, not playing down the various roles people may have played, but is understanding it perfectly, much more than we do. We just experience the wrong done against us usually, and that is a very, very limited position. But what if we really are dealing with one who understands and has the capacity to unravel? That is a very different scenario to the courtroom, and it's a scenario that links really well with the reign of Christ. Rather than this, with the reign of Christ as a point of hope where forgiveness and grace and hospitality and welcome all come together as an eternal a value under which we can all live.
Yeah. Particularly when this kingdom or realm, as I know we like to prefer to call it on the show, this kingdom or this realm is exemplified by parables that talk about a shepherd leaving 99 to seek out one, a father risking shame to go out and find a son who treated them poorly and then nicked off, um, a landowner someone who found a treasure chest on a block of land and sold everything they had because that was important. A diver who gave everything they could to retrieve one pearl. I mean, this is the kingdom in which we live. And when you start to understand that as the framework, it's very, very difficult to hold on to these other models that we like to throw in there as well. The Psalm supports, keeps this story going. That we found starting off in Ezekiel 34. We see this psalmist talking about coming into the gates of this realm with thanksgiving and entering the courts with praise. It carries on just before that with the image of the sheep, talking about we are the people and the sheep of the pasture. So there's this shepherd who has this field, and we're all welcomed into it. And because the steadfast love of the Lord endures forever, and his faithfulness to all generations. So again, you've got this psalmist saying, this is the reason we praise and worship this king, this leader, this realm, whatever you, because there is so much good in them. And when you think about history, the good kings were the ones that were loved and the ones that were honored and the ones that were mourned and the ones that people wanted to follow. You read any leadership material today and they'll say, if you want people to follow your leadership, earn their trust and respect, you can still be a boss and not be an a-hole, to be honest. And this is where we look at this character of who this God is, and we see that this is a God who doesn't want to scare us away, because this God has a place for every single one of us. And I think once we get that through our human minds, which struggle with that, even when you've got people in churches going, yes, I know that I have connection with God, but you, my friend, that's fear talking. As soon as they go, but you, that's fear. And it's fear that I don't think they honestly know. And they honestly can't accept that God's love and care and mercy and justice have been extended to them. Because if they did, they would understand how much it can be extended to somebody else. The psalmist here is simply playing on those themes some more and just reaffirming to us that this is a good place with a good king, and this is a good place for us to be.
Yeah. And being the sheep of his pasture is something to be celebrated rather than fought or denied or temporary. There's this, we end up with this sheep image here too. And I think it's more than just trying to find the psalm that talks about sheep like Ezekiel does. I think this is a real celebration of the place we have in the heart of God as people.
Yeah. That's good.
You want to look at Ephesians?
Let's do it. Let's jump straight through to Ephesians 1. Jump in. You keep going.
In light of the reign of Christ, I really like one of the middle verses here. With the eyes of your heart enlightened, you may know what is the hope to which he has called you, what are the riches of his glorious inheritance among the saints, and what is the immeasurable greatness of his power for us who believe. According to the working of his great power, God put this power to work in Christ when he raised him from the dead and seated him at the right hand of the heavenly places, far above rule and authority, power and dominion, and every name that is named, I read a lot more than I intended to there. What I'm really thinking here is, this reign of Christ is precisely what salvation is. Salvation is having our eyes opened to this reign of Christ, this hope coming in. And I don't think that's kind of just a one-off thing. I think that's, this is where I was talking before about the perpetual cycle of reading through these scriptures, arriving at the reign of Christ Sunday each and every year. We're people who are always having our eyes continually opened to this, and we're learning the implications of it. I just think this is this beautiful picture of where even Paul is not claiming to have arrived and grasped all of this. He's just claiming to be on the journey and praying the prayer that we'll get it,
right.
that we'll at least get the direction and the hope, and this extraordinary reign of this good, gentle, self-sacrificial God over all things. The hope this vision must inspire really is, I think, the reason Paul is writing all of this. He wants this vision to capture our imagination, and he wants this vision to be the one that we live out of. And notably, he's not just talking about a reign in heaven. He's linking it deliberately, profoundly, absolutely with the one who came and lived and died and rose again.
Right.
This is the one who reigns. When you read through the Gospels and you see this extraordinary Jesus that inspired people and did the most amazing things and forgave in the most extravagant way, this one is the one who reigns over everything. There's not a detachment where Jesus has suddenly become an angry, judgmental God and is now up on the throne in heaven and ruling over everything. Actually, it's this same one, this seamless story that's being told, that has the extravagantly gracious Jesus sitting over everything. And that's a vision that as we come to Christ, we are really invited, quite simply, to learn to live under.
Yeah, that's so true. The thing that's really important to remember here too is that, and again, you've probably heard people talking from these passages, particularly verse 21 and 22, far above all rule and authority and power and dominion, above every name that is named, not only this age, but the age to come. Sorry, just before that as well, raised up from the dead and seated him at the right hand in the heavenly places. There's this idea, again, if you use our human minds to comprehend how this looks, that God takes this Christ and says, right, be the king over all of it, Lord over all of it. But then if we have a look at, again, through the lens of this kingly realm and model of leader, emperor, ruler, whatever, that Jesus exemplifies, you can have all of this that Paul is claiming without someone sitting on a throne saying, off with his head, give them more land, bada bada bing. What we need to get our heads around is that this rule and authority and power of dominion comes not from a throne, but it comes from a way of doing and being that is infused in every single one of us by a spirit. God is spirit, and those who worship this God must do so in spirit and in truth. And when we allow that spirit to be infused, the spirit that was in Christ, that raised Christ, also gave him the authority to allow this way of doing and being to play itself out in the world. Why? Because when Jesus died, he modeled that way of doing it being at its best, and for us and humanity at its worst. It was the cap off to, we saw this in play, but I mean, that's the ultimate. But, and so we have this way of doing and being in the world that, and this is why the last couple of verses are so important to understanding the realm of Christ, that God has put all things under Christ's feet and made Christ the head over all things for the church, which is his body, right? So the head can do nothing without a body. I mean, for all the Futurama episodes people may or may not have seen, where they're rolling out the heads of famous people from the 70s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, all the way through Futurama, in these jars, the Beastie Boys coming out, and all they are is heads in jars rapping away. Or Jimi Hendrix came out on one episode, and Einstein's there, and because they've got all these heads and brains sitting in this special fluid, and they can still be alive, but it's just their heads, right? They can't do much. They have to be wheeled everywhere. And yet here we're being told by Paul, you can't separate the head from the body, because if you do, the head can't go anywhere or do anything. So how does this rule and realm of Christ get played out in the way of the world? Through you and I. It's lived out. We are this body. And sure, the head directs where the body goes, but when we understand it like that, there is a completely different picture of what this kingdom, if you want to go back to using that word, what this kingdom looks like. It's not a dude sitting in a chair pointing all directions. It's a movement of people who are living in the way that their king modeled, who are being supported and strengthened and encouraged and nurtured by this king, because this king is also, as we've seen, a shepherd who wants to feed and nurture and care for. And as we go and do these things in the world, that's how the hands and the feet move around the place. We are the body. We are the fullness, which is his body, the fullness of the one who fills all in all. So there is no king without the kingdom. There is no ruler without the realm. And the realm isn't a place, it lives through us. And when we get our head, again, this is a completely different model of king and kingdom. We've never seen anything like this, I don't think, as far as I'm aware, happening in history. Maybe in some places that it came pretty close. But this is incredibly powerful, and it really should strike us to say, well, if this kingdom is so different, why would its structure, why would that structure be set up the same way as we understand it? When we see people in power falling but Jesus is the perfect king. Yeah, sure. What does that look like? We haven't seen the perfect king in operation. Never. What would the world look like if we had more kings, more leaders, more rulers, whatever that looks like, but living in this way, where they were nurturing and encouraging and strengthening, and that the people were the kingdom at play? That's a really incredibly powerful way to think about it. And that just blows me away from this passage. Ooh.
There's a flip side to all of that, isn't it? That the body doesn't know what to do without the head.
Right.
So there is this sense of being directed and animated and, by Christ, the head here, that we are the body who is learning to do what Christ, the head, asks of us.
Right. Yeah.
So it's not just Christ can't do anything without us. We are his hands and his feet. It's also we can't do the right thing.
Absolutely.
We can't live this kingdom out without Christ. This is where the body head image is it's actually very powerful, because it's so impossible to have the two separate.
Right.
They're not. I mean, in some ways, the head is part of the body, and the body is part of the head. We're talking a person here. Separate these two even momentarily, and it's
Okay.
really, you haven't got either.
Right.
Well, you might, but neither will function. So
not for
there's
very
this.
long. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that I don't want to push this too far, but the head can't function without the body any more than the body can function without the head.
Yeah.
You remove your head from your chest, which breathes, which has lungs in it that breathe, and all the blood pumping around through your head. The head's just part of it. The body is just part of it. There's something in this that to have these two separate is so radically impossible.
Right.
That the church and Christ really become one. And I love that. I love that image. I think there's something really powerful in it. And it's worth kind of sitting with. For Paul to pick this image is really a bit mind-blowing. I mean, we're so used to, God is so independent from us, so completely undependent on us, if that's a word. Yet here is this image that just has Jesus and the community as one.
Right.
No functioning without it. And it's a beautiful and confronting image, I think, for the way we go through the world, for the way we behave in the world. It's an extraordinary oneness that's being discussed here.
And despite your caveat before, I completely agree, and I don't think it's stretching things too far. In fact, it's the image that Paul uses, not just here, but in other places as well.
Yeah.
Christ is the head and we are the body. And
yes.
Paul would have known very well what happens when someone's head is taken away from their body.
Absolutely.
That the head can't do much without the body, and the body can't do much without the head. This is why being one in Christ and with Christ is vital. And we need to understand that in that context. Likewise, when we understand the realm of Christ, the reign of Christ, the King, Christ the King, this is how we need to understand it, which is why our earthly models and understanding of stuff, our human model, just don't even get close. We need to be completely re-educated on what this means, which brings us to the gospel reading, which I'm glad we kind of did it the way we did, because when we talked at the start, we were thinking about maybe we chop and change some things up. But I think what we've created a lens through which to really read this passage well, because it could be taken, it could be completely misunderstood. If you come in and say it's Christ the King Sunday and read this without using those other readings as the filter through which to understand what's going on here, you could be in danger of understanding a very different king and kingdom.
It's a funny reading because, yes, it ends in a very, very confronting way. That you can, you can take this as a celebration of God who is judging and condemning. But this is also a deeply beloved passage by those who believe that doing the right thing in the sense of service to another in the world is vital. So you will find in the liberation theology world, this is a very central parable that Jesus tells.
Right.
You'll find in that justice arm of the church that this is one of those parables that that really tells us that the things we do for others are part of what it looks like to be faithful. And it takes it's loved, I think, because it takes faith out of something going on in my head and puts it into action. And it's that action that determines whether, you know, one group is on the left or the right of Christ. And yet there is I think there are arms of the church that love this parable because of its very judgmental, clear-cut imagery that's used. You know, one group off to eternal life, one group off to eternal damnation. So I think it gets appealed to by both the justice world or the justice arm of the church, and by those who are drawn towards that judgmental God who at the reign of Christ will fix everything by getting rid of some. So you can see how this is actually a very well-known parable.
Yep.
And it's pretty, this imagery of eternal life and eternal death is quite consistent in the Gospel of Mark. It's consistent parabolically. So I don't think the only way to hear it is to take it, you know, an absolute literal kind of way, which
right.
I think many are very tempted to do.
Yeah.
But maybe in light of, you know, the nature of judgment that we've looked at in Ezekiel and Psalm 100, and as we've discussed those, maybe this making of everything just, making of everything right, is a good lens through which we can consider a parable like this.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I guess it's the last little bit that's very confronting, isn't it? It's the last little bit that stands out. What's interesting about that is if you go into the language that's used in the Greek, kolassos, which is the word that's used for punishment there, is talking about chastisement, maybe some idea of deprivation, but it's really all about punishment. It's about you know, looking at the best way to put this. It's talking about a chastisement for what they've done, and if you put it side by side with the word eternal there, aeon, like we were talking before, this is you know, aeon is about a quality, and so we're talking about being placed in a situation where there's some sort of chastisement, some sort of rebuke, some sort of punishment for missing the key of what this whole kingdom is all about. And I'd probably say this, I'd probably say first and foremost, this passage, if you're going to focus on this passage as a passage that really talks about what Christ the King or Realm of Christ Sunday is all about, then it's about what we're talking about before, that if we are the body of this Christ, then what does it look like for us to be in the world? This is what it looks like. When I was hungry, you gave me something to eat. When I was thirsty, you gave me something to drink, etc., etc. So if we're going to live out the precepts of this kingdom, this is a pretty dang good place to start. but then the goat situation, what do you do with that? Well, when we understand what we see later, both in the words of Jesus, but also very explicitly in the words of Paul, what we're seeing is what is being talked about here is not so much a being thrown into some sort of fiery pit for all of eternity where there'll be weeping, wailing, gnashing of teeth and torment and you're never going to get out and that's it. If we're looking at what this is about, going away into eternal fire, eternal punishment, or quality of right now living within fire and punishment, fire is a really good metaphor actually, because it's the same one Paul uses when he's talking about how at the end of time, all of the things that we have will be placed in a fire. And just like wood, hay, straw, stubble burn up and turn to ash, gold, silver, precious stones, and so on survive. And so really there's this sense of a refining judgment that's happening here, a refining chastisement, a refining punishment, if you like, where these goats who have missed what this is about will find themselves in a place where there's going to be a refining happening, and through this refining begin to see and move into, hopefully, what it looks like to live in this realm of Christ again. Remembering that this Son of Man has come. Even as far as the gospel writers are concerned, even if you say, what about the second coming? Well, according to the gospel writers, the second coming should have already happened, or about the destruction of the temple. So with that in mind, if Christ has come, we are in the realm of Christ. And if that has happened, are there people who aren't feeding the hungry and so on? Yes, that's true. So what's happening for them? Well, hopefully there's some sort of shaking within them, some sort of disconnect that they're feeling, some sort of, like you were talking about before, this disconnection of body from head that causes them a disconnection of like vine from branch, that these things, when they come back into alignment, come back into congruence, then we start to see that kingdom coming through that person yet again. It also implies, when we look particularly and put this together with the writings of Paul, is that within those who carry wood, stubble, straw, along with that, there is precious gems, silver, gold, just like the tares and the wheat grow up together within each one of us. And we know this to be true. I can be really, really good one moment and be a horrid little scumbag the next. And as Paul said, I don't know why it happens. It just something goes askew and you do something silly, or you panic or whatever the reasoning might be. But the fact of the matter is, we have these things operating with us at the same time. What if the sheep and the goats isn't about separating two lots of people, but as a parable, it's about separating the good and the bad within each one of us and allowing the good, which represents what the kingdom of this king is about, to live through the body so that the head can direct it and can go out and do the things that it's called to do. I think there are far better ways to understand this particular passage than the very strict, very literal. I had people say to me, oh, this is not a parable. I'm saying, dude, it's about sheep and goats then. Are you telling me that at the end of time, the only thing that God's going to bring before him are sheep and goats? That's what it's about. But they represent, yes, it's a parable. Exactly. And there's way better ways to understand this than a courtroom scene in which some people are sent off never to be able to exist within the context. In fact, it doesn't really say that they're kicked out of the kingdom. It just says they go to eternal quality, punishment, chastisement, what have you. This, I think, is restorative justice in action. This is a hint of the restorative justice of God going on within every single one of us. And if we allow this realm and reign of Christ to operate in our lives and to change and transform us daily and to start to live through us, that's when we see the true reign and realm of Christ come about?
I love the fact that neither of these groups know when they have fed Christ or not fed Christ. Don't you?
Yeah. That's
There's
interesting,
this,
isn't it?
yeah. It's really odd. Neither group knows what they have done or not done.
Right.
There's this hiddenness of Christ among us,
Right.
and
Yeah.
I think there's something really special about this parable in that one.
In fact, there's
I love that it's a mystery for those who've done it. I think that's fantastic.
There's actually a quote going around in Instagram in a meme at the moment, and I'll see if I can bring it up. But it says something along the lines of all the people that you don't treat well are Christ, and Christ is all the people that you don't treat well. And I find that incredibly inspiring, in the same way that what we're seeing here in this passage, that they didn't know. That's a really good point. I love that. When did we not do this, or when did we do this? So it's not just the ones who didn't do it don't know.
Yeah.
The ones who did do it don't know either. What does that say for us?
Yep.
How do we know?
It just says you've got to go through the world, recognizing the need of others. That's what it's. And in doing so, you just may find yourself entertaining the very God of the universe.
What a way to finish. That's brilliant. This has been Between Two Sundays for the Realm of Christ, or Christ the King Sunday. The readings we contemplated today were Ezekiel 34 verses 11 to 16 and 20 to 24, Psalm 100, Ephesians 1, 15 to 23, and Matthew 25 verses 31 to 46. That's another year down, brother. We're done. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Yet here we are, ready to go back around the mulberry bush another time. Oh dear. Thank God there's only 3 years in the liturgical calendar. Folks, as always, please tell us what you're thinking, what you're hearing, what you're seeing in these passages. You can do that by dropping a comment down below if you're on YouTube, or if you're listening on Spotify, there's a little box that says, tell us what you think about this episode, and you can fill that out. Or you can send us an email at between2sundays with an S on the end at gmail.com. Or you can drop Mark a note through his website, which is barefootfollower.life. Send me a DM on Instagram, go to @monkindocs. And I'm going to put a link up this week, because and there's no compulsion, but if you want to donate to Men's Health for this stupid thing I'm wearing under my lip and have been for the last number of episodes, then you can donate to Men's Health, and I can shave this thing off very, very soon. Thank goodness. That would be a nice thing for people to do for you. What, shave it off? Dang straight. No. It's not doing it for me. Not doing it for me. Doing it for raising money for Men's Health. I think it's a good cause. I think we all know men who've we've lost far too early for ways or reasons that could be fixed. But anyway, we keep praying and hoping. Well, that's it, my friends. Another year, another season of Between Two Sundays done and dusted. Thank you, my dear friend Mark. Good to see you, mate. Likewise. And we will see you all next year. Next week. Read next week. For another edition of Between Two Sundays as we jump into the next liturgical year, which is year B. And we'll kick off with the 4 weeks of Advent. So until then, peace be with you, and we'll see you later on. Bye for now. See you then.